Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. I'm Ellie Gilbert. I'm the room host. I am an assistant director in the Division of Educator Recruitment and Development here at KDE, and I'm super excited to share with you this presentation today. We have Erica Price and Claire Johnson from the CKEC to talk to us about simple strategies for improving alternate assessment scores. So I'm just going to be quiet and let them take it away.
All right. Thank you so much for introducing us and welcome. Thank you all for joining us today. Um, as she said, I'm Claire Johnson. I'm the low incidence consultant at CKEC. I was a former assistant director of special ed, FMD, MSD teacher, and school administrator, kind of working as an assistant principal, although not really titled that way. So I've been in your seats and glad you all are joining us today. And I'll let Erica tell us about herself too.
My name is Erica Price. I am the Literacy and Assistive Technology Consultant at CKEC, and I was a MSD teacher in the class for 24 years.
All right, so we are going to talk today about some simple strategies for improving alternate assessment scores in our co-op region, which is in Central Kentucky. And it looks like I see a few names on here I recognize. So uh, um, hi guys. But in our region, we've seen a lot that we have many new MSD teachers, maybe not even fully certified folks in our buildings who are trying to figure this out. And they look at the standards and they look at where their students are currently functioning, and they just kind of throw up their hands like, what do we do? Like, how could I possibly get from here to here? And although it is not easy, we've just tried to come up with some ideas for teaching alternate assessment standards to our students in MSD classrooms, and maybe some simple things that our teachers can look at that can help make a difference in their scores. So we will get right into it. If you would like, feel free to scan this QR code for our resource folder. I believe I've also linked this on the grid. So if you want to click on it, you can go back there to our session and click on the resource folder link there as well, or type in the bit.ly. So I'll leave this up for just a minute. If you would like to do that, this just has, it's a compilation of some documents, many of which KDE has put together, some of which the state low incidence group before I was hired, so I can't take credit, but they put together to help with teaching these standards and to help with understanding the standards. So if you have interest in that, you can feel free to access that. And if not, that's okay too. We'll just give you some things to think about. All right, that's us. We already talked about us. So here's the thing. Here are the things we're going to try to talk about in our brief session today. We did a full day session on this when we first presented it, so I'm going to have to be speedy. And Erica, you feel free to chime in anytime you want to. The things that we're going to talk about today are helping the teachers know what the standards are actually asking them to do, because we have found that is a big barrier. Understanding what accommodations and modifications can be provided, because testing in regular KSA is very different than alternate KSA. And so helping teachers understand that, I think, is important. Using evidence-based practices for teaching, not just for IEP goals, but some of these same things can be used to teach alternate assessment standards. We're going to look at some instructional considerations, and then we are going to talk about practicing the testing format. I know probably many of you do like scrimmage testings prior to KSA testing in your buildings, and that is something that is important for our students on alternate assessment as well, but oftentimes they aren't really included in the whole school-wide scrimmage testing situation. So that's what we're going to talk about today. The first thing I wanted to talk about quickly, though, is just a brief overview of alternate assessment. If you're a new principal or you're just new to this terminology, I wanted to give just kind of a quick overview of what that is. And KDE always puts out an alternate assessment update at the beginning of the school year. So I have that linked here that was created by Krista Mullins, who is our alternate assessment guru at KDE this year. She's been great to work with, really enjoyed getting to know her so far this year. So I'm just going to speed through this and give you the super fast version, which includes a little bit of what alternate assessment is. So some things that are new this year, if you're in high school, the transition attainment record is something you do or your students would do in 11th grade, and there's only one version of that this year. There's some new scaled scores, and there's a field test. So we will look at those things. Your teachers have various tests that they need to take in order to be able to administer the alternate assessment, trainings they have to take, and quizzes they have to pass. Hopefully they've done those things. I believe the TAR training is still open, but the other ones are closed. So hopefully they've done that, or you've contacted KDE if not. The scores will be reported as scale scores, or were reported as scale scores this year, which was a change from raw scores in the past. And then attainment tasks are the biggest part of alternate assessment, and they are like multiple choice questions. They're presented one at a time, and that is the bulk of where our scores come from with alternate assessment. So they are continuing to, KDE releases some items after testing each year, for us to be able to use for training and teaching purposes. And so of course they have to write new items. So there is a field test this year. So teachers are getting those tasks in with their attainment tasks. If you've never seen them, those attainment tasks are mailed in a big sealed package, and teachers can do a variety of things with that paper that they're given to make it more accessible for their students. This is the calendar. As I said, the TAR training closes March 25th. So that one is still open if you're a high school administrator and you have a MSD classroom with some 11th grade students, and even 12th or grade 14 can also take this, although it's optional at those grades. And their new science standards, those will come out for alternate assessment purposes next year. But this is what I really wanted to show you from this update. So these are the content areas and the grades that are assessed for alternate assessment. So 3, 4, and 5, you can see the content areas, and they have those multiple choice questions, attainment tasks. Middle school, grades 6, 7, 8, all have those attainment tasks and these content areas. And then high school is a little different. Grades 9 and grades 12 and 14 are not tested. So grade 14 means the student has completed the 4 years of high school, but they've come back because they're not yet 21 and they need some additional time before they transition post-secondary. So just 10th and 11th grade have attainment tasks in high school. There's 2 testing windows for alternate assessment, unlike regular assessment where there's only one. The first one has already happened. It was just before Christmas. And the second one is coming up beginning in April. Yep, April to mid to end of May. Some of the targets are tested in the first window, and some are in the second window. I think that is all we will talk about in that from that update today. But hopefully that gave you a brief idea if this was new to you. So the first thing I think is really important for our teachers is to know their standards. And that might sound like, well, of course, but for a teacher who's brand new to this and who has maybe never even taught before at all, this can be huge. So we will click here. KDE has linked the targets that are the focus targets for alternate assessment here on their site. The teachers can go there, click and see them. And also, some good information in there about which window they're tested in. You can see over to the side. So window 1 is the beginning of the year. So that's before Christmas. And then they get a little explanation here of if their alternate assessment target includes the full target that all students are learning from in a regular education setting, or if there's a limit to it in some way. Sometimes standards for alternate assessment or targets for alternate assessment only include certain parts of the overall standard instead of the full thing. You can kind of see that in both of these. Here, there's a little explanation about how those are limited. So, and this is all, again, for reading grade 3. It goes all the way down, gives you all your targets there. So that's available on the website, KDE's website. It's very important for teachers to look at those and ask questions if they are not understanding, because that is an area that we've seen they really need a lot of support. So knowing and breaking those standards down can be very important. So one way that the low incidence consultants have tried to help do that is by creating this website, which is again linked in the resources that are in that grid. So they have broken down, let's see, I'm going to click on reading and writing just for example. The literacy consultants and low incidence consultants created this website to be a source of support for teachers who are teaching these standards and to help them understand the standards a little bit better. So for example, we looked at third grade reading a minute ago on KDE's website, and so we are going to click here on third grade reading. I really love these documents that the literacy and LIC's consultants created because they give a lot of extra support too. So you can still see the standard and the multidimensionality pieces that were on KDE's website. It also helps the teachers understand what the students need to do before they teach this target. So here are the prerequisite skills there in progressions. And then they give you recommended skills or I can statements. And then also some key vocabulary. So if the teacher, this one is hopefully a fairly straightforward target, but if the teacher didn't really understand what this was asking, this would be a great place for them to go and look at, okay, well, these are the specific skills I need to teach the students. Here are the prerequisite skills, so things they need to know first, and we can work on this vocabulary. And of course, you know, we've all probably been around a lot of different types of students in our careers, and MSD classrooms are no different. So these could need to be broken down farther just depending on the student. And there could be additional prerequisite skills that we need to go over depending on the student. However, this is a really great place for them to start, especially if they're struggling to understand the content. So those are broken down here. So again, this is third grade reading. So you can see those are all included there. It also includes down here at the bottom, just help with deeper understanding of the standards and then some instructional tools and resources that they might find helpful as they're teaching these standards as well. So again, that's on this alternate assessment website, instructional resources and supports. There are math resources there. Although, you know, the setup is a little bit different, those supports are still there for math as well, and social studies and science too. And of course, you probably saw, you may have seen a few minutes ago that science, we're getting new standards next year, but for the time being, or they are, the resources are here for them. So let's see here. Again, just different resources for them to click on, different ways for them to understand the targets. So social studies is only assessed these 3 times. So you see a lot less on this page than you did for, say, for reading. But so the other thing, that's breaking down the standards into targets. I think that's something really important for them to do. Also making sure the teacher understands the verb. So what is the target? What is the standard actually asking them to do? What's that verb in there? That's really important, in my opinion, for all teachers to understand, but worth mentioning here particularly as well. And then I would encourage them to talk to their grade level teachers. So if they, you know, read the standard and think, they look at the document, break it down, they're like, all right, where do I start with resources? The first thing I would do if I was teaching, say, maybe 5th grade math standards, and I was like, oh my gosh, how do I teach that? I would go talk to those 5th grade teachers first and say, what do you do with this? Because that, although you probably can't, your teacher probably can't copy verbatim what the 5th grade teacher's doing. Maybe they could use some of their resources. Maybe that would trigger an idea about, well, I could do that, but use manipulatives or a calculator or a resource sheet, something like that. So those would be good tips for your teachers as they're getting started with understanding these standards. Erica, anything else to say about that one, or think that's about it?
No, that's about it. That's exactly how I would take my standard to the teacher and say, how do you teach this? Take notes on it, and then in my special ed mind, rework it to meet the needs of all the kids in my classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
All right. All right, so the second piece to look at is accommodations and modifications. So I'm going to pull up the resource guide. So this is KDE updates this each year and updates the link so that it's, for the current school year, but the resource guide here gives us a lot of good information to consider when we're giving alternate assessment and teaching. So I'm just going to scroll through it briefly and let you look at some things. So as I said, it's different doing alternate assessment and regular KSA. So alternate assessment must be those attainment tasks that must be a one-on-one setting. Many of our kids who take regular KSA might have one-on-one testing, but many of them might also test in a small group. But with alternate assessment, it must be one-on-one. So that's something to remember. Things that we're not allowed to do in regular KSA, even for our students with accommodations, are things like emphasizing words in a question. But here we can emphasize bolded or underlined words when we are reading to the student. Carefully read italicized directions. Determine, there will be words in parentheses, and we can determine which words we should use for our particular student based on what is given there. Determine if they would benefit from the picture response options, just having the test read aloud, or having those picture responses adapted. So each of those answer choices for the multiple choice questions, those attainment tasks, we can make those pictures bigger if our student has a visual impairment on alternate assessment. We can change the pictures out, but if we change one picture, we have to change all of the choices. We can do some different things with them to make them accessible for our students. It would be great to scroll through here, have your teachers scroll through here and read these things if they're concerned about testing or if they have questions. We don't have time today to go through this whole thing like Erica and I did in our full day training, but it really includes a lot of good testing tips. For example, like, again, another change that's different for alternate assessment versus regular KSA is that you can reread any portion of the script passage question or response again when it's determined that the student wasn't focused or engaged. So, of course, you all probably know if you have given regular KSA, you're not allowed to do that unless the student asks you to read that again. But with alternate assessment, you can determine the student wasn't focused, refocus them, and read that again to the student. There's just a lot of differences, kind of nuanced things that would be important for your MSD teachers, FMD teachers to know. So just so as I said, you can adapt the answer choices, the picture that goes with them, but if you do one, you have to do them all. You can also color them. Color one, you got to color them all, enlarge them, same thing. What you do to one, you have to do to all of them. I would like to show you all some of these symbols, though. One great thing about this resource guide is that it gives the teachers the symbols that the alternate assessment is going to use for different terms. So many of our teachers our students really need visual supports to help them, understand what a question is asking or understand an answer choice. And so here in this resource guide, the teacher can look and, like, anytime that the alternate assessment has a question where an answer choice is all of the above, this is the symbol that's going to be used. So the teacher can use this symbol in their instruction if they would like to help the student get oriented to the materials and the symbols, and help them understand that that's what that means. They, again, could also use their own symbol and use that symbol in testing as long as they change all of the pictures as well. So this is general terms. There are sets of these pictures for each subject that's assessed. So sorry, I'm probably making you all sick with this scrolling, but I'm gonna try to go down and show you. So here's English language arts, for example. This resource guide will have a little blurb on English language arts specifically, and then it gives those symbols again and the term that would be used with them in testing. So this is just, in my opinion, a really good thing for teachers to look through. I think sometimes they don't even know this is there and available, but they could make copies of this and use the different pictures in their instruction, which would help teach the student. So The other thing I linked on here was just the IEP handbook. And this just has some ideas for accommodations and modifications in teaching. I'm not going to go through that just for the sake of time because we only have 10 more minutes and I want to get through these other few things, but it's linked there as well. All right, so third thing to do, use evidence-based practices. I think so often we think about evidence-based practices linked to IEP goals, but there's no reason those same strategies can't be used to teach these targets as well, even if they are not our IEP goals for our students. So there's two things we're going to look at. The SDI toolkits, which we have some great sessions on those today. I've seen on the grid that are the whole 30-minute session is going through those. So our version is obviously going to be very abbreviated. And then also we're going to look at high leverage practices for students with autism. Erica, do you want to just give a super quick run through of what this looks like
Oh,
for reading
Claire,
and
you know
writing?
I don't do this super quick. Okay,
Quick is not Erica's thing.
what you're looking at is the Reading SDI Toolkit. We have it broken down into the 5 components of reading. The one you're looking at right now is PA. At the top of each component in blue will be the specific standards to help guide you mostly when you're thinking of writing IEPs. So there's that. Then that green area is what's the problem. So you have different specific pieces there. So when you come down below it, when you're thinking that what's the problem, PA, you have a description of it, some same age indicators when compared to peers. Then you have a sample go. You have IEP progress monitoring. And then there's some SDI specifics on research-based SDI tools to help with that area. Oh, geez, I'm doing it really quick. I'm confusing myself. Some SDI specifics to help with PA for phonological awareness. This tool is to help you understand where your students' weaknesses are when compared to same age peers and to give you ideas of what evidence or research-based tools you can use to help move them forward.
All right. Yes. So if your teachers come to you, special ed teachers, not just MSD teachers, but any setting special ed teacher, and ask, tell you they're having trouble writing this IEP, don't know what to target, this is a great resource to direct them to for strategies, for help with creating that good IEP goal, and for progress monitoring, which is part of the law for those of us in the special education world. So just a great resource for you to be able to direct your teachers to. The writing toolkit is laid out the same way, so I won't click on that one, but I will click on the math one really quickly as well. It's laid out a little differently, but has very similar things. There's an overview video here at the top if you need an in-depth look at that, or your teachers need an in-depth look at how this is laid out. They can watch that video. And then this one is broken down into just different overall big ideas in math, rather than grade level or anything like that. But it gives, so for number systems and operations, it gives an area of concern, some problems you might see with your student, and then here are some strategies you might use to teach your student. And if you don't know what forward and backward chaining is, for example, you could click on it and you are taken to this piece right here, which kind of explains it and gives you some more information. So another great thing to direct your teachers to as well. And any of these starred with a little star here are good for MSD students in particular. So just something to know. This is a compilation of evidence-based practices for students with autism. This was put out by the University of North Carolina, who has long been a leader in the field of autism. Just a list of some really great strategies, evidence-based practices that give really high yield results for those students. So also could obviously be used with any student, and especially those in your MSD classrooms would benefit from these great evidence-based strategies. That list, something you can direct your teachers to as well, and they can do a little more research. Many of these are already linked in those toolkits that Eric and I just went over. All right, so we got 2 more things and 6 more minutes. I think we might be able to get through it all. So just some instructional considerations. This I won't go into super deeply, but just reminding your teachers, if they're struggling with this, they need to be able to motivate their kids to want to learn a little bit in these settings as well. So often it's hard to connect alternate assessment standards maybe to something the student really cares about or make it functional for their everyday life. But, we can do our best to reward them as they're working for us and, help keep them engaged in that way. These are different token boards and reward menus that I'd linked that they might want to use in their classrooms. So you could feel free to share that with them. Providing appropriate feedback, so knowing how much correction versus acknowledgement of their effort to give is very important. Giving specific feedback to them, to the students as they're teaching is also very important. So there's a really good link here by the Autism Helper who we really like at CKEC, who has some great thoughts on her blog about feedback. So that there's a place that they could go to look at that as well. And then just something that's important for general overall teaching in an MSD classroom is to follow a routine. You really want your teachers to have a routine schedule and follow it daily to the best of their ability, because we know there's days that just ain't gonna happen. But if they can pick a time of the day to teach alternate assessment standards and kind of follow a similar routine so the students know what to do, there's some supports here like a transition song to help them move from one activity to the next, routines, a photo daily schedule, because our MSD students really benefit from visual supports like a picture schedule. All of those things are important to help the student know what to expect, help maintain the calmest behavior possible in our MSD classrooms, and also help them absorb as much information as possible. So I kind of mentioned this when we were going through the resource guide, but using those same visual cues consistently. So every time all of the above is mentioned, use the same picture to represent that when you're practicing and teaching. Every time, I don't know, topography is mentioned, use the same picture every time when you're teaching to represent that. Again, using the visuals that the teacher already has. So things like board maker, symbol sticks, lesson picks, those are often ones that our special ed directors programs they'll buy for our MSD classrooms to help them make those like visual cues and pictures for our students. So again, they can use those pictures. They can use them in testing too, as long as they replace all the answer choices with pictures from one of those programs. And anytime they can incorporate special interests, so those things that those students are really interested in into their teaching, the better off they're going to be. So there's just some tips linked there. A really cool site called Tar Heel Gameplay to teach cause and effect. Just some resources for your teachers to look at if they're interested as well. And again, literacy strategies linked there. And last thing we're going to talk about really, really quickly is practice. It's just important.
We're at the 2-minute mark, so there's your warning.
All right, thank you. I've been trying to watch my time. It's just really important for your students to practice. Oftentimes, a couple of things will happen. Your teachers will either take them to a totally new classroom to try to administer the alternate assessment because they have to be one-on-one, so they'll go in like a closet. Well, of course, the kid's like staring around the room if they've never been in there before, or teachers will clear their classroom out, have their IAs maybe take their students to the library, so the kids in the classroom all by themselves, and that's kind of like shocking and fun and new too. So if we can practice those settings, even just a couple of times a year to get the student kind of used to that, so that's not so new, that's one less barrier we have to overcome. And again, you can see I'm harping on this, making sure we've seen those symbols and materials before. So that is how to improve your alternate assessment scores in a very quick nutshell. I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have or your teachers may have as they get into this. And if you need me to send them specific resources, would be most happy to do that as well. Claire.johnson@ckec.org is my email address. And each of you probably have a low incidence consultant you're connected to, but I'm the one for Central Kentucky, but I'd be glad to help any of you if needed. And I'm sure Erica would say the same thing, especially with literacy resources. So thank you all for joining us today, and hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thank you all so much, and you did perfect with your time. So
Yay.
I am going to stop the recording and it will be uploaded later.